Hello again, and welcome back to Educator.com's Advanced PHP with MySQL course. In today's lesson, we're going to be expanding our knowledge of object-oriented programming by learning about object methods. Specifically, we're going to talk about what object methods are and what their purposes are. We're going to talk about the subject of how to call object methods, the syntax that's used to do that. We're going to talk about a special variable known as the this variable, which is going to be important for use within our object methods. We're going to briefly talk about what are known as getter and setter methods. And then we're going to finish up by talking about how to output the results of object methods within double quoted strings and how to basically use this variable we're going to learn about to be able to call one object method from within another object method. So basically classes can define functions. In a way, we've been having our own function libraries. For example, filelib.php has been a library that just contains a number of function definitions that we've been able to use. Well, actually, when you create or define a class, for example, the item class, you can actually define functions that are known, and when they're part of a class, they're known, functions that are part of a class definition are known as methods. And basically, they are functions that work on a particular object. Basically, so when you define an instance of the item class, for example, it might have a method that says return cost. And when you call that method on that particular item, it'll return maybe the price of that, the price property of that particular item. Basically, the methods are defined object methods. And it's still it's a function, but again, the terminology with object is called the methods. It's defined within the class definition, just like a class's properties. It's defined within the curly braces. We're going to take a look at it, what it looks like in a second. It has the same syntax that we use for defining functions, and that it even uses the function keyword. The one difference is that actually we place the public keyword in front of, at least for the time being, we're going to be placing the public keyword in front of the function keyword. So let's take a look at a class person where we've defined a function, or defined a class method, excuse me. So for example, we have a person class with two properties, first name and last name, which would just be strings to represent the first name and last name of the person. And this is what we've seen before. We've come across this in when we first learned about objects, about how to define properties. But also, if you look down here, you can see that we've actually defined a function. It's within the curly braces of the class definition, which means that it's a method of this person class. And we use the keyword public and then function, and we say public function, and then we define the method just as we would any other function that we've done before. In this case, we define a function called hello, a method called hello that takes 0 arguments. It doesn't return anything. It actually just outputs an echo statement. So basically anything that we've been able, all the rules that apply to functions that we had learned about, or in the introductory course that you know about from your experience with PHP, is going to apply to object methods as well. So we know that we can define methods and objects, but how do we call them? Well, first of all, you have to have an instance of an object to call the method. And then in order to do that, to call the method, you actually use the same sort of accessor syntax that we use to access the values of the different properties, and use that to call the method on an object's method. So for example, let's say we define a variable called person1, and we set it equal to a new instance of the person class, of this person class that we've talked about. Well, in order to call the hello method on that person, we list the name of the variable, followed by the dash and the greater than sign. And then instead of following that by the property name, we follow it by the name of the function. In this case, we had a function called hello. And the way that you distinguish that as a function as opposed to a property is you include a pair of parentheses afterwards, which is sort of intuitive because that's basically the syntax we use for functions. Now, for example, if our hello method of our person class took a parameter, then we would also specify these parameters within the parentheses, just as you would anytime we've been calling any other functions that take parameters. So let's actually take a look at if we look at our person class, we've defined this function hello. Let's take a look at a file called hello.php that's actually going to call that method, so we can sort of see this in action. So we've we have a test file here that includes the definition of the person class. We instantiate or create a new instance of a person object. We go ahead and we use the accessor syntax to go ahead and set the first name and last name properties of this particular person object, this instance of a person object. And then we're going to actually call or invoke the hello method for this particular person object. So in this case, we use the dash greater than sign, and then we say hello with parentheses. So if we actually go and run, and if we just quickly look back, all our hello function does is just outputs or echoes a statement that says hello. If we go and look at this lecture example and we look at hello.php, we can see that the output of it is a person says hello. And that's a result of calling this hello method on this person object. And so that's basically the syntax that you use to invoke an object's method. One other thing to do is, for example, we could, just as with other functions, we could include parameters. So let's include one parameter. It's a string called world. Now we could go to our person class, modify the function definition so that it accepts a string, and then say, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to echo. We're going to have an echo statement, but we're going to echo the, actually we can echo the string that was passed in. So now we have an object function, an object method that can take a parameter as well. So if we go ahead and both of these are saved and we reload our page, and actually let's make this string we're passing, okay, it's world, so it'll be different. And we go ahead and refresh our page, we can say a person says world. So there you can see how an object method functions or works just like a regular function does. One other thing to note is that object methods can return values just like a normal function can. So for example, let's say we had an object that modeled a shopping cart, which is something we're actually going to be adding to our web application. But let's say we already had that and we've declared an instance of it. So we have this cart1 variable that's an object of our shopping cart class. Maybe that shopping cart class has a method on it called calc cart total, which is a function we've been using in our utility library. Well, if you run that calc cart total function on a particular cart object, let's say it calculates that cart total and returns it as a value. So here, basically what you do in order to get the value, to get the return value of object method is you just call it just like you would a regular function, and you can use an assignment statement. So in this case, we're assigning the value returned from the calc cart total function into the total variable. Now that's the same thing as if we had maybe instead done total equals, oops, calc cart total, or maybe we passed it an array of the items in the cart. Whereas this would return the value, basically the return value of this function takes its place and total gets set to it. The same thing happens here. The return value of this whole object sort of statement gets returned and gets set into the value total. So for example, we could alter our hello function, our hello method of our person class, to instead of actually echoing the string, we could have it return a particular string. So for example, get rid of the echo statement and just have it return a static string that says a person says hello. So now what we can do is if we actually run this the way it is, what's going to happen is it's going to call this hello method. It's going to call the hello method. It's going to return a value, but we're not echoing it, and it's not echoing in the function. So actually, if we run the script again, nothing's going to happen. No output's going to happen for that function. So what we do is we update it to just echo the result of that. So here's an example of having an object, an instance of an object, calling a method on it that returns a value, and then using that value, using that return value just as you would a return value from any other function. So here we're going to echo the value returned by this hello function, hello method of the person object, which is going to be that string. And if we refresh the page now, we can see that it goes ahead and output it. So that's an example of how object methods can also return values as well.